And we want to acknowledge we were hoping that Cynthia could join us today, but again, she couldn't join us in person. So we are now going to move on to another specific case study of how one company, a financial company, again, did their automation journey from start to present in the future. So please join me in welcoming Diana Lee Caplinger, Executive Vice President, Head of Enterprise Enablement and Intelligent Automation. That's a long title, so I had to read the whole thing, at Truist.
Indeed.
And I want to begin with more on Truist because this company, if you're not familiar with it, did something pretty remarkable during the pandemic. It became the largest bank merger in over a decade, and this deal just closed in the early part of this year. So a lot of work done, even as other companies had to adjust and shift, and some even stopped for a while. Tell us a little bit more about Truist to begin.
Yes, it's a bank merger between BB&T Bank and SunTrust Bank. And as Janet mentioned, a large endeavor. Several years went into what we have today that is now Truist. And at Truist, we have a T3 approach. T3 means touch plus technology equals trust. That approach is how we engage with our clients and communities. And so it's an exciting time to be at the bank. We have a number of exciting activities underway. I heard a number of speakers talk about cloud transformation and AI, and we have the same type of initiatives underway at the bank. And so we're headquartered in Charlotte, so we did move. We're headquartered in Charlotte, and as we think about Truist, and in particular, we think about the automation space at Truist, we keep that T3 approach top of mind. We keep it in mind as we engage with our business leaders and think about how we design processes. So if you would like, Janet, I can dive more into that.
Well, let's begin first with the merger. And because a lot of people have business events where all of a sudden their company has changed, you're suddenly much bigger. Can you give us a peek into how automation helped you internally all of a sudden become a much bigger company?
Yeah, absolutely. So a number of ways. We had to leverage automation capabilities to help with data extraction, data transfer. Think about the amount of data both heritage organizations had and the endeavor it took to put everyone on one tech stack, one set of rails, one client system. The amount of reports that leaders need so that they can engage as they work with not only new teammates, but maybe even a new region. So automation helped in a number of different spaces.
Now, I want to ask you about how you use automation in your actual business. I think we heard Bryson mention the B word, bot, which some people still find incredibly frightening, but you use bots to do something really critical for the bank and also affects your bottom line. How are you using bots to recoup money?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So we actually use the term bots. We'll also say digital workers, and then all of our digital workers actually have human names because we do put them on performance improvement plans when necessary. And so one automation that we've had, particularly in this time with all of the cyber threats and fraud underway, we have a bot called Dollar Chargeback. And what that bot does is it logs into our internal system, it logs into one of the debit card providers and does multi-factor authentication to that provider to file the claim on behalf of the client, assuming the client meets the criteria that debit charge is actually fraud. It'll submit the claim, get the information, log back in internally to our system, and where Truist would have traditionally written off that expense because of volume, we now recoup that back per our contract with the debit card provider. So it is a situation where it's not necessarily an efficiency play, but it is actually helping us recoup funds, which is helping our clients and, of course, helping the bank.
And I don't know how much you can share. This is not an insignificant amount of money. What sort of range are we talking about?
Yeah, I would say it's in the millions. It's definitely in the millions. We're seeing a higher volume, but it is something that is significant, as you mentioned. It's not a small dollar amount in which it's helping our clients because it's real money, right? It's not credit, and it's helping us from an expected loss standpoint.
Now, Truist is the result of a merger of some banks that are very familiar to all of us. You are still working on your brand being a very new company, a new bank, a new entity. And in our earlier conversation, you described it as a higher tech bank. what kind of bank, what is that going to mean to your customers when they hear higher tech bank? How is that going to make their banking easier?
Absolutely. As I mentioned before, with our T3 approach and us being client first, client centered, and really pushing the needle in terms of innovation, we have a physical innovation space in Charlotte, Oculus Lab. You name it, we have instituted a number of capabilities. For our clients, it means a number of different things. It means we are really spending the time and pulling together the right audiences to understand pain points and actively work to address those pain points in as much real time as we can. In the automation space, that is using optical character recognition for structured and unstructured data so that we can act faster in different situations. It also means performing functions such as cash advance or loan advances, having a bot or a digital worker process the information so that the balance is updated in almost real time so that that client can have faster access to loans. And so it shows up a number of ways, not only for our clients, but for our teammates. I believe Bryson just mentioned just making sure we're keeping the teammates happy as well because of all the talent activities happening in society. And so our focus is twofold. It's not only the clients, but on the teammates as well as we institute more technologies. One of the processes we recently introduced was using process discovery tools. So putting devices or installing those capabilities on teammate laptops so we can see what they're doing and not just capture the happy path, but those other derivative paths so that the automation that we build really is more robust and really fulfills a greater purpose for that teammate so that they are freed up to spend more time on activities that drive higher client value. And we are really laser focused on engaging with clients where they want the human touch, not because where our business process requires it.
I'm going to ask you more about the workforce in a moment and how you're helping to improve their lives. Issues that Bryson and Josh talked about. But first, I have to ask you more about that Oculus Lab. So you're making banking fun, not just high tech, but fun. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, I mean, you go in there and we have set up a space. It's a full VR AR lab room with Oculus so that, we are all in an environment where we have to try things differently, but to do things differently. What does that mean? The banking experience for me, as someone who used to write DOS programs, not stating my age, but stating my age, versus someone who has just graduated or is in undergrad today is very different. Right? I had a checkbook. They don't have checkbooks. So how are we bringing those experiences to them and making it more tangible while also engaging in traditional banking activities? We also have a basketball net in that space too.
Nice. So going way beyond lollipops and squeeze toys, go visit the Oculus Lab.
No toasters.
Yes. So I want to ask you again about workforce and how automation can help, because again, this is a pain point for everyone. I have not heard a single company not express difficulty with hiring and retaining people. You had a merger where you're still working out what jobs will be, what jobs are redundant, where people will go. How are you using automation in this very large marriage as you're trying to optimize your workforce and also continue business seamlessly?
Absolutely. One of the previous speakers touched on it. How do we automate those processes that are routine, mundane, such as password reset? Teammates, if you have 200 employees, and we call our employees teammates. You have 200 employees that are performing password reset, 25, 30 times a day. If you can automate that process, whether it's assisted or unassisted, it makes a financial impact. Two, that frees them up to engage with the client. So from a merger and really post-merger standpoint, how do we really employ these tools so that we can reduce the number of manual entry, reduce errors, and reduce the number of repetitive tasks that, quite frankly, teammates don't want to do. They want to do the fun activities. They want to engage and really help clients and move the needle. So how do we really move forward and deliver that for them and put that at their fingertips?
And I think that there's an important issue that we need to bring up about improving the workforce experience. I have heard this came from the cybersecurity arena, but very well-trained people, bright people, were forced to do mundane things. And not only did it lead to incredible burnout, which meant that they resigned and just gave up or moved to other industries, but of course the mistake level went much higher, because if you're doing something that's not fun and not engaging, you open yourself up to more vulnerabilities because it's just tedious.
Yeah, absolutely. We have circumstances, not necessarily directly from from workforce standpoint, but we have bots that help their teammates that then improve their satisfaction, their teammate satisfaction. So if a client needs to withdraw money against their trust account, that's something important, particularly if they need to withdraw that money so that they can make a tax payment. That's something they need immediately. So when they engage with us, how quickly can we respond and deliver against that request? That's where those type of bots, those type of automations, those type of processes can make a big difference to someone who that's their day in, day out job. Particularly if we can make it where we have a VDI set up, they can go run and kick off that bot, and they can still continue to work and perform other functions on behalf of that client. That's where you can really get that lift and help increase the teammate satisfaction and the client satisfaction as well.
So we have a privilege with you in that we are looking at your automation journey from the start to present and in the future. And in this case, since your merger was so recent, I want to ask you one question about that. One more question about the merger before we look ahead. And that is, among the banks that were involved in the merger, they probably had their own systems of automation. How difficult was it marrying all of those, or deciding what to keep, what not to? And did you need a lot of outside help? How time-consuming was this?
Yeah, it took us some time because both banks did have different automation platforms. They both had more than 100 each automations. And with us moving to one tech stack and one set of processes, we had to evaluate what to keep, what was going to be fruitful, what was not, and what was going to deliver the best value. So we do have a value framework that we use as 6 factors. We look at something that may be considered emergent, COVID, PPP, risk, client experience, productivity, potential profitability, to help us evaluate what to put in our backlog to automate on the new platform that we use at Truist. So we did our own migration as well as part of the merger, while evaluating what automations needed to go on the new platforms, what automations just needed to live until the merger. We have automations that we sunset at the merger because they were no longer needed because the new Truist process didn't require it, or required such heavy lifting because of technology changes or changing in how we perform a function in a certain state that we got rid of it. And so we had to look at a number of factors while also looking at the broader technology ecosystem. What's happening in a retail loan servicing system versus commercial loan servicing system? Does that system have e-sign set up? I also have Pega workflow in my space. Do we already have automation that we're using that may be a little bit faster than one of our other automation, our primary automation platform? So we took a number of things in consideration to make those decisions. It took us, I would say, about a year and a half. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we still must deliver value back to the bank. So that means we could not just focus on migrations and creating the new automations. We also had to deliver net new automations because we still strive to be, I'm going to say, net neutral in costs. Not quite there yet, but net neutral in costs back to the bank. So what new automations can we deliver to deliver additional business value?
We are now down to our final minutes of the final panel of this summit. So I want you to help us look ahead. You have this new bank merger. It's sort of a new birth of entities that existed for a while. So in your role, what are you hoping to do with automation in the future?
That's a great question. In world hunger. No, I'm joking.
That too. Great answer, yes.
I would like to make sure that my team and I are delivering against some of our strategic corporate priorities. How are we helping to increase operating leverage? And you cannot just attain operating leverage by cutting costs. We all know we've been through a number of cost-cutting initiatives. We have to look at ways that we can increase revenue. So how is my team and I showing up to deliver that and help Truist achieve that goal? In addition, how are we helping employees further increase their experience at work? What does a day in the life look like for a call center agent versus a loan servicer? How are we making their jobs easier? How are we helping clients really understand the value of doing banking with Truist and all the capabilities that we bring, and how we live out our purpose, which is to inspire and build better lives and communities? So for me, I would guess it would really be that last sentence if I had to sum it up.
And I believe that you are probably like all the businesses here, knowing that certain problems are not going away, like the workforce problems and such. And so you need to use automation to do that. Are you expecting to increase automation every year?
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the items with the merger that we experienced, I forgot to mention, was just volume. Right, on one set of tech rails, of course, our volumes tripled in certain areas. So we are continuing to expand and build out more digital workers. I mentioned earlier, for a worker that we may have operating in production, if they're not delivering what we expect, we are looking at their performance. We are looking at their metrics. How many hours are they running? Are they delivering the value that we set out for that digital worker to deliver back to that LOB? So we are expanding in the space, but not just adding more bots for the sake of adding more bots, even though we've had to do that because of volume, but we're looking at adding more macro level automations that have a wider impact on a wider scale versus looking at just tasks and addressing particular tasks. If something we've done recently, actually post-merger in the enterprise operations space, is we did learning sessions. We brought together 75 to 100 people, ran some demos, taught them more about automation, and then we did deep dives, work with the card ops team, work with the deposits team, and really dive into their macro level processes. What's working well? What are their biggest pain points? Use data from the call center to say, here's where we need to focus, here's where we need to automate more in the space. Let's prioritize that, and let's pull that into our backlog.
That's great advice. And I want to ask you if you have any other final advice for some of the companies that are joining us today that are not as far along in automation as you are, or sitting in a tech role as you do. For the person here who's maybe a chief operating officer saying, wow, I need to catch up, or we need automation, or we're going to start really falling behind. What is your advice to those companies?
Absolutely. I would say look at your own data. Comb through, or use your AI to look at the pain points that you're hearing from your clients. Look at your teammate survey data. What are their biggest pain points? Look at exit interview data and really use that to create a new roadmap for you to what to go attack first, and where you may get deeper synergy, where you may get deeper value than you're seeing today from just the traditional work with an LOB, engage, automate their space, move on. More often than not, you'll see greater synergy working enterprise-wide. I'm really fortunate that I have the product teams and all the technology teams for all of the capabilities and solutions under my umbrella. So I'm able to work on both sides of the fence. And when we start working with contact center and with servicing and with another team, that's more the end-to-end that needs to be addressed versus this particular process. And I would say that you'll see greater lift in a number of areas, as I mentioned before: client experience, teammate experience, when you start looking and operating more end-to-end enterprise-wide versus individual departmental silos that may have one pain point, but they may not realize something upstream or downstream is really causing the client impact.
All right, Diana Lee Caplinger, Executive Vice President, Head of Enterprise Enablement for Truist. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences and wisdom.
Thank you for having us.